Hi, everyone. This is Shafqat Islam speaking. I'm the co-founder and CEO of NewsCred. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone a few more seconds just to get started. So I will check back in about 15 seconds. Please hold tight. All right. I think we have a pretty large audience ready to get going. So without further ado, we will start. My name is Shafqat. As I mentioned, I'm joined by Alex Cheeseman, who heads up strategy for NewsCred. We're excited to share some of the results of a survey that we did, and then more importantly, not just summarizing those challenges, but also suggesting some solutions and best practices to overcome those solutions. And obviously, it's all centered around the impact that COVID-19 has had on marketing. Before we jump into the material, just wanted to say I hope everyone is safe, healthy, both physically and mentally, taking care of yourselves, taking care of your loved ones and your family, and finding the right balance. And if there's ever anything that we can do personally as individuals or as a company, please do reach out. I know these are times that we have never expected, and certainly times that we will never forget. And it's important that we are here for each other. So hope you're doing okay. In terms of the agenda, I will kick things off by summarizing the research and the survey results. I'll then hand over to Alex, who will share some of his perspectives and potential solutions, ideas, best practices in this COVID world that we can deploy and experiment with. I will then share some closing thoughts, and then we'll go to Q&A. We received a ton of amazing questions in advance as you all registered for the webinar. And so we're going to try and address as many of those as possible, and we may do a follow-up just doing a Q&A session after as well. So let's get started. This is the survey that we commissioned. We worked with a partner of ours, Sirkin Research. The survey was titled The Impact of COVID-19 on Marketing. And we focused on 4 themes. Number one is kind of what are the challenges stack rank that marketers are encountering as a result of COVID-19? What are some of the changes that marketing leaders are making in terms of strategy, but also how they work? How are budgets being shifted around and reprioritized is the third. And then what MarTech tools are people using to make their work life a bit easier, and how is that impacting? If you're wondering who we researched, it was primarily US-based respondents. So for those of you who are outside the US, just wanted to caveat that this initial research was done in the US. However, we are planning on doing a similar survey outside of the US, and I think it'll be very interesting to see how countries that are past the kind of the peak of the curve or are in recovery mode, how their marketers are responding, and if those responses are different. And I think there's going to be some really interesting research we do there. In the case of this particular research that you're looking at, it was done in the US. We had over 100 respondents and across a diverse set of industries and across a diverse set of titles, manager level and above. We did this survey in early April. So it was just at the peak of kind of the pandemic in certain locations. And so really it was top of mind for most folks as they were adjusting to the new reality. Unsurprisingly, almost everyone was working remotely as of April 10th. In fact, I'm curious to know who was not working remotely. But one thing that we did glean out of this survey is for many, many marketing teams, this is the first time they've ever had to work remotely. So being set up to work from home when you're not physically in and around your marketing colleagues, when you can't physically have meetings or brainstorming sessions or whiteboarding, it was the first time for most of our survey respondents. And so we found some interesting learnings just based on kind of work setups. Secondly, in terms of how they're shifting both their priorities, but also their budgets, here's kind of what we found were the biggest challenges that marketers faced. And this is StatCrank. So the number one challenge that our respondents gave us was that having to shift their priority and strategy on a dime, having to completely overhaul kind of their plan, how they were going to spend their program dollars, how they're going to shift their hiring priorities. That was the biggest challenge that they faced. So kind of the rate of change and the magnitude of change and being able to respond was very hard. Also, the second biggest challenge was providing visibility and of all of these changing plans. So being able to manage very fluid plans and providing visibility to each other, to their executives. You know, what content are we creating? What campaigns are live right now? What does our calendar look like? Being able to provide that visibility was challenging. And then the third biggest challenge was the bandwidth or the resources to very quickly create new content. You know, we saw that there was a lot of budgets moving towards content, which we'll share in a second, but most marketing organizations lack both the bandwidth in terms of people, the process, and in some cases, just the ability, the capacity to create new content. There was a bunch of responses. You can see kind of the 5 or 6 at the bottom that were all around how they work. So, you know, being able to allocate resources, managing their remote team, being able to find and repurpose assets, managing requests, you know, that used to come in face-to-face. Now requests from outside of marketing have to be triaged and through some online process. So a lot of work-related changes. And so that segues to the next insight we have, which is kind of working remotely has created a lot of what I call work about work. So a lot of time spent updating people on the changing priorities, status updates, putting together calendars, updating spreadsheets, lots of additional meetings or checkpoints. And so a lot of these mundane tasks and kind of status updates via email and reporting changes has become a bigger and bigger part of their work, particularly because they are working remote. You know, the fourth insight that we found is, you know, we looked at where are the decreases happening in marketing investments. Unsurprisingly, events have gone down almost 88% to practically nil at this point when it comes to physical events. Couple other things to notice is digital advertising is down about 27%. What we found here, and that Alex will talk about, is that while, you know, digital advertising did go down, the magnitude is not great. What has changed is the messaging within advertising has changed dramatically. It's completely different advertising than most brands were running prior. So where did those decreased budgets go? Unsurprisingly, a lot went to virtual events and also webinars. We are seeing a lot of that movement to content, 72% increase in budget for web content. We found, you know, I've often said that events are just content on stage. And so now that those events are not happening, that content is going on to, you know, blogs, newsletters, thought leadership hubs, portals, or other digital channels. So these are the biggest increases in budget. One question, by the way, we got from folks is, how long do we think this shift between, you know, shift in dollars moving from physical events to virtual events is going to continue? Is this the new normal? And let me caveat my answer by just saying this is an opinion. So I don't, you know, it's based on my research, based on my reading, based on my discussions with both health experts and marketing experts, but ultimately it is an opinion. I don't believe there will be any physical events this year in 2020. I don't believe there will be any physical events for marketers anytime in 2020. And I think you'll see all of the events that were moved to the back half of the year, or all of the events that were originally scheduled for the back half of the year will either be canceled or they will move to virtual, or they will be shifted to next year. And so again, this is an opinion, but this is how we're preparing. And I would advise you all to prepare as well, knowing this, because it really changes how you think about your virtual events and webinars. Another question we got is, what do these webinars and events look like in the future? I think if this is going to be the new normal, there's an opportunity to really rethink how we do it. In fact, for NewsCred, this may be the last webinar that we do that's in this type of format where we have slides and we have a number of presenters. I think there's an opportunity to completely rethink how we do these webinars. Maybe we use Zoom rooms where we can do breakout rooms where there can be small discussions. Maybe there could be more Q&A. Maybe there's a lot of new formats that we can experiment with. And I think we really have to ask ourselves, how do we create a really exceptional, differentiated webinar environment? Because otherwise, webinars themselves will get commoditized pretty quickly. There was one other question that we got, which was, are we seeing an uptake in participation in webinars? For sure we are. This webinar itself, I think, last time I checked, had over 1,300 registrants, which is more than any other webinar in our history. So people are spending more and more time and are eager to learn. And so we'll touch upon some of these themes. And I think the last insight that we got from our research is we looked at all of the respondents, and then we cohorted those respondents into two buckets: those that are using some sort of work management tool, whether it's MRM, whether it's a content marketing platform or a marketing work management platform. We cohorted them into two buckets: those that are using these sorts of platforms and those that are not. What we found is that the ones that are using some sort of technology platform for collaboration face on average about 30% fewer challenges when it comes to work collaboration, visibility, being able to manage and realign people and projects and budgets, being able to provide visibility to their C-level or their colleagues. We found that there's about a 30% less impact on those that are using some sort of software. So here's a quick summary. I'm not going to go through all of these 4 points because we just spoke about them, but I think the more important thing is, what can we do about it? With that said, I'm going to now hand it over to Alex, who will share some of his thoughts, some of his ideas on the opportunity that has been presented to us as marketers based on COVID-19. And I really do believe this is, while some of the hardest times we've ever had to go through as a marketing community, I think it's also the opportunity of a lifetime to really experiment and try some new things and focus on what works and really go back to fundamentals. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Alex.
Thanks, Shaf. Before I start, actually, I do want to share a slight nervousness that I have. And for those of you that are listening, there is possibly a 10 to 15% chance that one of my two children may burst in for a guest appearance during the webinar. So if that does happen, I will apologize in advance. But fingers crossed, they've probably got more interesting things to say than I have, frankly. So I wanted to start the presentation by referencing this quote from Sir Martin Sorrell. He said, "This is not 2008, it's not 9/11, and it's not the 1990s downturn. It's not even the 1970s oil crisis. This feels like wartime." And I think this is really important because we mustn't underestimate the severity of this situation. It's really easy for us to sit in a bubble, to look at data and stats, and to not even think outside of our own circumstances. But we have to remember, people are losing loved ones, jobs, and are having to adapt to extraordinary conditions. I think I read a stat recently that 1 in 6 companies is going to go out of business. I mean, that's phenomenal. The physical, mental, and emotional devastation of this is going to impact us for a long time to come. And it's such a human situation where lives are literally at stake. So when we think about what we should do as marketers, any message must come from a stance of compassion and helpfulness. It can't be self-serving to meet sales pipeline numbers. You know, we also, at the same time, have to remember that there's no one size fits all solution for what should we do and how should we do it. There's nothing that's going to be right for everyone. Um, but what is important is because a lot of people have taken this crisis and have started a brand new strategy, and a strategy that I like to call this is apocalypse marketing. You're probably the same as me. I can't tell you how many COVID clickbait emails from pseudo marketing gurus I've received forewarning me of the end of humanity, and the only thing I should do is to rip up my marketing rulebook and start again. Disregard all of the work I've created in the past. One of my favorites. You must adapt or die. It's all of a sudden we're confronted with this kind of real dross of thought leadership that is telling us to scrap everything that we've done in the past, to move away from brand building and the activation that we've produced and the meaningful results that we've created, and to start to do something completely new, abandon everything and do something new. And I think with that in mind, I like to refer to this quote by Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr: "Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose." Shaft, what does this mean, being a native French speaker?
Oh, I didn't realize you were going to put me on the spot, but the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Exactly. And I think this is probably more important today than it's ever been. We are in one of the most challenging crises in modern history. There's pain, there's suffering, there's loss. And, frankly, there are more important things to be concerned about than our marketing strategies. But what we mustn't do is lose sight of the fact that at some point we will get out of this situation. And when this happens, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, will society have fundamentally changed? Will human nature be different? Will the DNA of who we are, what we do, be different to the behaviors of the past year, past 5 years, past 10, past 50 years? And some things naturally will change, but the fundamentals of human existence and Maslow's hierarchy of need, whereby we aspire to self-actualization, having moved away from the requirements of hoarding toilet paper, the fundamentals of who we are will be the same. The values that you've built your brand on will be the same. The important piece is that the insight from the campaigns that you've invested in for the past years, past months, will that have completely changed? Or will most people revert back to what they've always done? Albeit with some shifts, perhaps in the way that they do these things, but we must remember technology has adapted faster than human behavior, and we've been playing catch up for such a long time. And granted, this period has helped to accelerate how we've adapted, but the two are unlikely to ever meet. And so, if this is the case, then the rule book that we've all been building is perhaps even more relevant today than it ever was. And I like to refer frequently to this research by Peter Field and Les Binet, which really advocates the importance of brand building. This isn't new. Brands consistently over time that invest in brand building versus sales activation will see longer term improved results. And these are things that brands like Adidas have come to realize due to their focus on shorter term, direct response, sales driven messages. Brand building requires reach, frequency, saliency. People value consistency. More than ever, you have to reassure your customers, not just plaster some tepid COVID self-flagellation on top of your core values. We have to ask ourselves, in this kind of crisis, what should we do? And as there is no single playbook, I'd like to share some kind of guiding principles that perhaps we can take elements of and apply them to who we are and what we need to do. In an imperfect moment, you don't have to be perfect. I think it's really important to show your human side. We've spent so much time spray painting our brand purpose on top of our sales campaigns. Now is the time to step out of our shells and to show our human side, show empathy, show support, be real, and really let this come across in your communication. If you have things to say that are valuable to your customers, if you have an idea, don't spend hours or days on Zoom calls, arguing over, what stock imagery should we use, what should be the order of words that we use in this particular quote. You'll have missed your moment, right? You need to be quick, you need to be in the moment, and you need to be real. And I think, frankly, in the current climate, people appreciate that more than something that has been, plastered on and through 15 different rounds of approval. And then I think the final piece, and this is probably one of the biggest opportunities, nobody on this planet is going to be going to South Africa this year to shoot their next commercial. Right? We're going to have to adapt to a world where it's going to be a little bit harder to create these beautiful new things. And so every single one of us on this call will have existing content, and whether that's existing ads, whether that's written content, whether that's imagery, today is the time to repurpose that. Use your existing content, slice and dice it. We're going to see a really big uptake in user-generated content. Probably most of you are seeing the kind of the Campbell's ad, which is literally just customer content with big smiles on their face. Use these existing assets that you have and use that to build out your new approach. You don't have to pick up a camera to shoot new things. So if we take those kind of, those guiding principles, how should we then apply those? And there's probably 3 different areas that you can focus across. There's community, you've got your customers, and you've got your colleagues. And all of those could, cross over at a certain point. But let's jump into the first one, community. What do you think each of these brands here have in common? I'll tell you. Each of them is doing something which is improving the lives of their community, making them a better place to be. But the piece that is, I think, probably more important is that, despite the fact that LVMH has kind of changed their supply chain to create antibacterial gels using alcohol, despite the fact that Dyson has pivoted to create surgical masks, none of these brands here are shouting about what they're doing. So the opportunity, I think, is to do something that is meaningful for society, for community. But I think at the same time, it's really important not to shout about it. And I think perhaps, Shaf, this is something you can talk a little bit more about based on some of the recent initiatives that you've gone through.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say that we as a company have a moral responsibility and obligation to give back to the communities that we live in. And when, New York is one of the worst hit areas, we had a team of volunteers at NewsCred who came together unofficially outside of like the work environment, but just to create a small initiative called 1 Million Masks, where we were delivering up to 1 million masks to healthcare workers on the front lines. We were getting the masks and other PPE from China and storing it, and built a website so nurses and doctors could order it online, and we'd deliver it the next day through a partnership we had with with UPS. And so we did all of this, but we didn't actually even tell most of the company about it, and we certainly didn't tell the rest of the world about it. We just went about doing it with a small team of volunteers. And I think it was like 3 weeks after, when we had already delivered, hundreds of thousands of masks, that the NewsCred marketing team finally did a post about it, and then they've been doing some Instagram about it. But really the only reason that they've been doing the marketing is not for highlighting our participation. They've been doing it because we're using it as a way to raise funds or get the word out to more healthcare workers so they can order PPE for themselves or their last loved one. So I thought it was an interesting example, again, of how any company can give back, whether it's directly related or indirectly. And to your point, we didn't really scream about it or talk about it. We just did it.
Yeah, and I think that's, often when we talk to different companies and brands, they get caught up in all. There's nothing that I produce or create that's going to help, right? And sure, there are businesses and brands that are more aligned to existing needs and wants, but every business, I think, can do something that will help to make society better. And I think it's a case of thinking laterally, thinking creatively, being smart, and thinking, what are the things that matter to me and how can I do them? This is an example called Love My Local. It's actually a partnership between Carlsberg, Britvic, that's a drink manufacturer, I think Facebook and LinkedIn. And clearly, all pubs and breweries are closed today, but they've partnered together now to create a platform to help the local breweries and pubs to deliver pub food, pub drinks, and to start to generate some kind of commerce and business for their community. You don't have to be a creator of surgical masks to help communities. Think about, from your own perspective, the things that matter to you, and ultimately what you can do to help. Think about your customers. This is clearly an obvious one. This is Xero. Xero is fantastic accountancy software. They've created a business hub, which is there to help businesses to plan through the financial difficulties, to take care of their teams, to run businesses remotely. Xero is accountancy software. They know that they have customers that need their help, and they've created content to support that. I think the second point to take away from this as well is that this does not look pretty, right? We've seen a million different content sites that would look a lot better than this, but I don't think that matters. If you're able to create something valuable for, your customers, then you should be doing that, and putting it in a place that's easy for them to access, easy for them to read, and easy to improve their lives in some shape or form. This is a big one. From personal experience, taking care of children is probably front of mind for a lot of people on this call. And the simple pivot from Mattel, creating toys, but actually realizing that they have a role to play in helping kids to be more creative, and at the same time help parents. Things like this are where you should be putting your time and effort. It's less about those kind of sepia toned, like twinkle piano, slow music, zoom in on your brand that's been around for 200 years and talk a little bit about kind of your employees and customers. Think about how you can make the world a better place and help your customers. And that, if you have that as your North Star and as your guiding principle, I think you're going to be in really good shape. It's so important to think about the life circumstances that people that are your customers are going through. Chef, I remember actually downloading the work that you created for kids to color in. Where did that idea come from, and what was the kind of path to get there? Once again, being a software company.
Yeah, Alex is referring to, we created a coloring book and an activity book, primarily targeted towards children, but also adults apparently love coloring and activities. We got this idea mainly from talking to customers of ours, and we asked them, like, what's your biggest challenge? I called a lot of our customers directly just to see how we can help. And, a lot of them said, the marketing stuff is hard, but it's even harder just being at home and entertaining my kids who are now, they're young, they're going crazy. And so someone on the team just came up with this idea. Let's create like this amazing coloring book and activity book and put it as a PDF, and then allow our customers and prospects to download it. And it was one of the most well-received campaigns that we've ever run in our history. We got so many nice, thoughtful messages and emails. Literally nothing to do with NewsCred, no call to action, nothing. We just gave it out because we thought it was helpful. And, it, again, wasn't perfect, but it was quick, and it solved a problem for our customers. And, I was really proud of the team that came up with it at NewsCred, and they just ran with it.
And how can the parents listening in on this call that are desperate to get hold of such a thing, how can they do that, Shaf?
They could probably go to our blog, insights.newscred.com, or we'll send it out to all the webinar participants. It saved me many, many hours of turmoil and anarchy in my house. I just give it to my kids.
Yeah, for all of you marketers out there, there is not enough content there to help children. So that could be your biggest driver.
No, UPS and Pitney Bowes, both in the logistics, packaging, shipping industry, they both did some interesting variations of this. I think Pitney Bowes, also a client of ours, they had a thank you kit where you can print out like little thank you messages, one pagers, and then kids color it in, and then you put it on your door. So when your delivery folks come, they get a nice thank you message, because UPS, FedEx, USPS, these people are still delivering every single day, same with other countries. And so just a nice thank you. My kids love doing that. We put a little envelope next to it with like $5 in it, and so the delivery man can take that. So that was a really interesting example from a couple other brands as well.
Yeah, that's, I mean, the key workers and what they're doing is just out of control. It's yeah. Another conversation and definitely another webinar perhaps. So the question, I suppose, that's going through a lot of people's minds, as we've come up with some different opportunities from a creative perspective. We've spoken about that you don't have to necessarily have a supply chain or manufacturer to help. And what do you need to do? And I think to your point, understand what your customers want. It's probably never been more important to have social listening in place, to actually ask people what they need. I definitely think at the minute there's a bit of a kind of a COVID overkill, where there's been way too much content going out there around the actual event itself, the crisis itself. I think right now it's really important to spend some time to truly understand the areas that people need support in. And you can, as I said, use social listening for that, but equally ask people. People are so vocal, and they have time, and I think now's the time to really validate the decisions that you're going to make, even before you go out and do something like this. And then the last group and segment that you can apply this kind of lens to is colleagues. Your employees, people that work for you, and there's so much that you can and should do, and there's so many different ways of kind of adapting both your kind of internal, external comms to support this. I think the impact from mental, emotional health is going to be absolutely monumental. So when you consider how you take care of the people that work within your own company, the same things that you're putting out for your internal comms is going to be valuable externally. Think about ways of providing financial assistance, and that can just be in the form of advice and directions and things to do and things to think about. Think about some of the repeatable formats that you can do. The fact that Shaf mentioned there's a really nice coloring in book, so you can create one of those per week, and that's content, and that's value, and that's something that you can give to your customers. And there's something you can do internally, because you'll have parents that work within your organization. It's so important to stay connected within your group, but also think about connecting to your customers. So these are principles that apply to the employees that work for your business, are the same things that you can perhaps repurpose and leverage to help your customers, because at the end of the day we're all going through this together, and we all have similar challenges. So don't isolate what different functions within your organization are doing. Today in this kind of online remote working world, thinking about what other people are doing, other teams, other businesses, other groups of disciplines. Think about how you can each leverage what everyone else is doing, repurpose that and share that. It's just going to make you a much more effective and smarter organization. This is an example of just communication that I quite like from Vodafone. They put out regular letters from senior stakeholders that are designed to help employees. This one's about how Vodafone keeps their systems alive with the increase in traffic and data consumption. That same note is really valuable for customers. So I think my takeaway from here is things that will add value to your employees will also add value to your customers and your communities. And I want to touch very quickly on the importance here of actually driving employee advocacy, because at the minute it's really easy for you to go in a direction and start to add a lot of value, do some incredible things. It's really hard for you as a business and a company to talk about those things. I met a while back with the CMO, regional CMO of Disney, and she was explaining to me that in the UK there's a hospital called Great Ormond Street, and the once a month they send the Disney characters in costumes to the hospital, to the intensive care wards, and all of the kids get to interact with their favorite Disney characters, which is incredible. It's heartwarming. It's a wonderful. It's a really wonderful story. The trouble is Disney can't talk about that because it's just so inauthentic. And the way that people should be start thinking about, well, if I start to do these incredible things, if I start to help my employees, how can I help them to better talk about that? And that's through something like Sociable, which is a tool to drive employee advocacy. And think about how you can start to leverage your army of remote workers that sit there and help them to tell better stories by using tools and technology like this that will help them to share the stories that matter with their social networks. I've spoken about quite a few different things here, but I want to pause at the very end and kind of share this quote from someone I found randomly actually on the internet, Sue and Bubakaz. Out of constraints comes creativity. Out of chaos comes growth, and out of fears come love. There's so much that's happening right now, that is going to force us to think differently, to think more creatively, to adapt and to change. And as humans, we are incredibly good at doing this. So despite all of this turmoil that is happening, we will come out of this with new ideas, new ways of working, and ultimately, if collectively as brands we group together, we will make the world a better place. And I think this is a really nice quote to hopefully end my my monologue.
Great. So thank you, Alex. Just a few closing thoughts from me. So both formal and informal ideas and campaigns and executions can deliver really exceptional value to your audience. And I would stress that it doesn't have to be perfectly planned and formal executions. As we mentioned, whether it's the coloring book or the activity books or some of the other initiatives we've seen from the other brands, like the UPS example I gave or Pitney Bowes, I think a lot of these things were turned around very quickly. But I think the key here is that it's all about figuring out how to create value, right? We always say that content marketing is a way to exchange value, to be valuable. But now is the time more than ever, right? Your audience is online and eager to consume, but you have to stand out and be different. I think you have to become a trusted advisor, and that's how you can build a long-term relationship and a long-term value for your brand. And finally, like in this unprecedented environment, this is a time to build rapport, not just with your colleagues, but also with your customers, and try new things and build muscle memory that will last you a long time. And then from a CEO's perspective, as I run NewsCred, there's kind of three things that I think about. There's the company perspective, which is the first slide. There's content, which is the second column, sorry. And then the third is just around how we do work. When it comes to the company strategy, I've just been going and saying to everyone at NewsCred, whether you're in sales, in CS, in professional services, like, we have to be customer centric in every single thing we do, and we have to let it shine through. And one of the things we did was we actually for 2 to 3 weeks paused all of our outbound BDR activity because we felt like it was not customer centric enough. It was a really good learning. because we should be customer centric all the time, but we felt like during this pandemic, it's so important to show that empathy and put your customer first, and really not put NewsCred and our products and services on the back burner. So we actually paused our BDR activity for a while to like figure out kind of the content strategy, which takes me to this column 2, which is we audited and we optimized the content. We created a lot of content. We repurposed the content that we thought would be valuable to our customers. And then when we turned on our BDR function again, we initially did a soft kind of launch of the BDR, like restart of the BDR function with the activity book and the coloring book and things around just like mental well-being and working from home. And then we're slowly getting to creating content and publishing content around kind of the research that we're doing. So this webinar, and then kind of ideas around kind of how you can move your marketing budgets to digital. So we're kind of moving through that stage by stage and making sure we're always being customer centric. And then the last piece around work is, it's the first time NewsCred's been all remote. And we are using a lot of our collaboration tools and technology that we have, whether it's Zoom to do all of our meetings, but also we're using our own CMP to collaborate around what campaigns are we running, what are the marketing ideas that we have. All the requests that we would typically get from sales now all flows through our system. Calendars are being updated in real time. Everyone at the company knows what kind of initiatives we're running through our software. This webinar is not meant to be about NewsCred, hence we only have 2 slides about what we do. Whether it's help with strategy, that first column you saw, whether it's help with content, whether it's work management software, let us know if there is anything we can help with. We're doing a lot of things to provide financial relief to our customers, but also prospects who really need this type of software or services. So just ask, we may be able to help you. And if you do want to learn more about NewsCred, this is what we do. Kind of the leader in enterprise content marketing. We're also the #1 work management software. So you can read about us for Gartner and Forrester. But I'm not going to spend time here. I'm just going to kind of close on this idea that Alex talked about. Like, remember, the foundations of marketing haven't changed. What has changed is it's been a forcing function both to digitize our marketing efforts, to take them online, but also what's changed is it's put a laser focus on this idea of being customer centric, thinking about our customers' needs and their desires and their wants. And to, a big part of Alex's point was some of those intrinsic needs and desires have not changed. And so how do we really tap into that from all of our marketing? With that said, I think we have a few minutes for questions. We have a lot of really good ones. And I will take some of them. Some of them are more for Alex. We got a lot of questions around webinars, virtual events, etc. I touched on it at the beginning. I'll just quickly address, like the 4 or 5 questions around that theme. Yes, I do believe it's the future. Not only is it the future, because this is how it's potentially a more effective way to market. It's certainly more like in a cost-conscious environment. They're much cheaper than physical events, but I think it will also be forced to do it, as I mentioned, for the rest of this year at a very minimum, potentially first half of next year as well. But I would just push you to think about new formats. So not just slides and presentation. Think about breakouts, think about virtual rooms. Zoom has a lot of this functionality out of the box, and just how you can be different when it comes to webinars. As I mentioned, I think over time it will get saturated once every single company moves to doing virtual events and webinars. So really the burden is on you, both in terms of the content, but also formats, how you could be different. I'll take that one other one, and then I have 2 questions for Alex. One question we just got is, what are the key marketing metrics to watch in a COVID or post-COVID world? For NewsCred, at least on the B2B side, I'll say we're focused extremely ruthlessly on what we call early indicator metrics. So early indicator metrics for us is stage 0, 1, and 2 pipeline. Some of you may refer to them as like MQLs and SQLs, and then your actual qualified pipeline. But we look at kind of the earliest signals. So before stage 0 for us is someone who we are setting up a meeting with, right? They've either inbounded or we outbounded, but they are interested in setting up a meeting, so we're scheduling. But even prior to that, we look at web traffic. Like, is our web traffic up or down? How does the web traffic change for different parts of our website or different topical areas? How are people searching more for the software side of our business or content side of our business? Are there specific products or use cases that they're searching for? So kind of web traffic is the earliest indicator. We then look at, of that web traffic, what percentage is from our qualified accounts. So what is our qualified accounts or target account web traffic is probably the second stage. Then we look at meetings that we are scheduling, meetings that we've had. And so those are the earliest stage metrics that we really focused on. And we provide and summarize this for the whole company, for the exec team. Every week we're actually measuring this so that we can get ahead of kind of impact on our overall business. Next question is, how can marketers prove their worth to departments who may need to cut budgets post-COVID? So Alex, do you have some thoughts on that?
I certainly do. I think, you know, in an uncertain world, there's probably some clear facts that won't change, and that is, if you're a marketer and you are unable to report back on the return on investment of the content that you're creating or publishing, then I think you will lose budget without doubt. You know, it's, you know, incumbent on us, you know, post-COVID to have, you know, figured out what is the, you know, path to purchase. You know, how can I look at, you know, which content is driving what sort of action down the, you know, the customer journey. I think we're at the same time super fortunate from a certain perspective. You know, if you're a shop, you cannot sell things physically. The only way for you to sell something is, you know, online. And, you know, the best way to promote that, or the only way to promote that, is using, you know, marketing and advertising. So there's now an opportunity to start to get closer for those businesses that perhaps, you know, had less investment there. I think secondly, from a B2B perspective, with, you know, sales teams that are no longer able to have, you know, face-to-face meetings, to have cups of coffee, to, you know, attend events, you know, one of the only ways for them to, you know, generate, you know, business is to use, you know, marketing and advertising to drive in, you know, new leads that, you know, they can potentially, you know, start to you know, nurture. So I think, you know, you fundamentally must be able to prove the value of any marketing dollar that you spend. If you haven't been able to do that, now's a really good opportunity to look at all the digital tools that are available, all of the digital opportunities that have to be in place for your business to frankly survive. And now it's absolutely incumbent on you to look at the tools and technology that you need in place to track that. And that should be the discussion versus cutting the budget. You know, marketing has to happen, and you need to be able to demonstrate the value off the back of that. And so if you haven't got the tools, now's the time to go and talk to your CFO to make sure that you can have that attribution, because, you know, otherwise, you know, how are you going to drive future business?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Alex. Like, in a typical recessionary climate, marketing budgets get cut early and often. However, this one is very unique in that, you know, physical events are canceled and sales teams aren't able to travel at all or as much. And so there may be an opportunity here for marketers that's atypical of recessions, in that digital marketing and content may be the only way to get in front of your customers and prospects. And so really thinking about that channel mix and where you double down, and if you can show your CFO and your CEO, like, hey, content is the way we're getting in front of prospects, it may be the only way. I think you can certainly fight for budget, not just keeping budget, but increasing budget. And I think, let me just look at a couple other questions. This one is an interesting one. Generally, prior to the coronavirus, how much has technology changed the skill set and way in which we do marketing, and how much has this change been accelerated due to coronavirus? Alex, I think you have a unique perspective on this one.
Yeah, well, I don't think it has changed, right? I think that it's clearly accelerated things, frankly, because, in order for you to operate remotely as an organization, you now need tools and technology to help facilitate that. But, fundamentally, outside of that shift, um, I can't think, and please jump in, Shaf, if you have a different thought. I can't think of anything else that would have kind of fundamentally changed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, technology has transformed marketing for a long time. So if the question is, has COVID changed anything? Probably not. And maybe there's some slight acceleration. I will say there's no excuse now not to use collaboration tools. I think marketers have often been laggards when it comes to using new technology for managing work and collaboration. And so much of it was still managed manually or in spreadsheets and managed. Like I've seen calendars that were physically on people's walls. Like marketers are having to move more to like online collaboration platforms, and so that may be accelerating. And I know some of you skeptics may be thinking, well, NewsCred sells that software, so are you just saying that? I think regardless of what tools you use, being able to collaborate remotely is essential. So some of the, I guess, I would say younger generation marketers are used to that, but we are seeing that shift happening fast.
And
One
sorry,
question.
sorry,
Yep.
just on that final point, I think what's going to be really interested is to look at the efficiency that will come out the back of things. And that's just because now there is nowhere to hide. Like you cannot hide that your output isn't hidden anywhere. If you've got the tools and tech in place, like everything is clearly visible. And I think that's going to be a good thing because it's just going to make you a more efficient and effective organization.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. One of the challenges that marketers always face is, whether it's sales or others, they always ask, well, what is marketing working on anyways? Like how often have we heard that question? And so now if you use collaboration software, for example, to manage all your intake and manage all your work, it can be made visible to the rest of the organization and they can see how much marketing is actually doing. One final question, and then we got to wrap up, is what are the best strategies for customer retention during this pandemic and post-pandemic? I actually think during the pandemic, one of marketing's biggest jobs is to focus on your existing customers because new customer acquisition will be slower. And we've noticed that, right? Pipeline generation is slower and the amount of time it takes to move customers through the pipe is slower. However, your existing customers and retaining them are surely the top priority of the company, of the CEO, of the CFO. So I think really focusing on your customers is key. We are doing a lot of customer marketing, helping customers prove their own worth by helping them create case studies, doing joint case studies with them. We're putting customers on stage to talk about like the work they're doing so their companies can see it. But certainly a lot of our content is also focused on existing customers. And so kind of making retention your key metric and seeing like, hey, customers that engage with marketing content are being retained at a higher clip. I think that would be a very valuable thing to be able to show. Final question is, will this webinar and the deck and everything will be sent out afterwards? It sure will be. Everything, including the slides and this audio, will be sent. There's a lot of really good questions that we got that, we aren't going to be able to take all of them just because of time, but we may follow up and do a AMA, like an Ask Me Anything or a Q&A session. And we might do that over Zoom and do like a very collaborative Q&A where marketers can ask us and ask each other questions. So we're excited to do that. I think we're out of time. Thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you, Alex. And again, we're here to help all of you lean on each other, be well, be safe, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. And we hope that we get to see each other at some point in the future. So thank you very much.